So one of the things I hear often is that AMD is always playing catch up. So guys, let's talk about this. Let's dissect this and see what I think about this, because I want to give you my opinion about that now that I've had the opportunity to both own NVIDIA and AMD. Starting, with the top of the AMD with the NVIDIA stack at an RTX 5090. And then going back through the last few generations, I want to give you guys my honest take on this and see if maybe that will help you to choose, where you want to be. So guys, we always hear that AMD is always behind, they're not competitive, that they bring features out way too late and stuff like that. Well, on one point, I do kind of feel like NVIDIA having, well, okay, this is going to be kind of weird, and I know you guys are probably gonna be a little bit confrontational about this and stuff, because we get a lot of terms thrown around, pretty often on the internet, like, oh, this is the best and it's better and stuff like that. So when it comes to, let's say, DLSS, okay, we're going back to like the 20 series when DLSS first came out. DLSS 1 was, not that great, definitely had some issues and stuff, and I would argue that it didn't even really come out. DLSS really didn't come out in a point where I thought it was worth using till DLSS 4. And I know this is going to sound confrontational, but you guys have seen me, through the 3000 series, through the 4000 series, or the 40 series, the 30 series, 40 series, and now the 50 series. Back then, and look, even Digital Foundry has come out and said this, that you would lose detail in DLSS when you would utilize that. Like, it would pull out detail. And for me, it always gave me this like uncanny valley look to my games, and I just didn't like it. I did not really appreciate the way that it depreciated my visuals. It was good for clarity and for sharpness and all of that stuff. Like, I do give it that. Like, it did work. The AA was better. Definitely worked with a lot of the shimmering and stuff that Digital Foundry always points out and stuff. And, Digital Foundry does some pretty good analysis. Sometimes I think that the analysis of games is sometimes it goes a little bit too far, to be completely honest with you guys. Most of the stuff that they complain about is stuff that it's like, you usually forget about it pretty quickly, and when you start enjoying your game, like some of the coolest games in the world didn't look that great and don't hold up that well today, but they were still enjoyable and they were still playable. So I never really put too much stock into things like shimmering or stair-stepping or just some of that stuff, a little bit of blur or motion blur, stuff like that. Yeah, like, would I like it to be better? Absolutely. But some of the fixes, with DLSS going into that and fixing that kind of broke other things for me in a way that I was like, oh man, I'd rather have the detail and maybe a little bit of shimmering or something like that. So when you look at that and people are like, oh man, well, AMD's just late to the party. Well, or they're behind. Like, they're behind. Well, if you look at it this way, DLSS 4 and FSR 4 both launched around the same time. Both of them have impeccable image quality retention, and they solve all of the shimmering and flickering and all of the other things, like the stair stepping, and they give you a really good quality, both of them. And I would argue that for at least that, the upscaling part, AMD is right on time. Now, the biggest issue that I can see, okay, the biggest complaint that I would have is that with AMD's iterations of FSR 1 and 2 and 3 and now 4, well, with 1 and 2, neither one of those got upgraded to FSR 3 that often. Some developers go back, like Cyberpunk was finally decided to go from like FSR 2 and then bring 3, then finally bring 4 at the very end of that game's life or whatever. And it is what it is. At least now, if you have an AMD GPU, you can absolutely use that, and it does. It cleans up your image quality and it looks a lot better. But there's still other games out there that have not received any type of upgrade from FSR 2 to FSR 3. There's still games on FSR 3.0 that still don't have 3.1 so that you can actively turn on FSR 4. So yeah, in that regard, yeah, AMD definitely was behind, but we've seen them get significantly better while at the same time still providing GPUs that had enough RAS to power to actually give you a good image quality and a good experience. And if you really look at FSR 3.1, if you're using like quality or balanced, you got a pretty decent image quality. And the biggest thing with FSR is it never stripped out that detail while using it. So if you were going to play at 4K and you were going to use FSR, you were still getting your detail, but you were getting a little bit of artifacting, you were getting a little bit of shimmer, you were getting some of those imperfections that, you know, have up till now been pretty inherent in games. And now I can honestly look at image quality for games and be like, wow, this is actually really good. You know, it's almost like now you can almost expect to buy a game and not have to look at those prior blemishes, and you can enjoy it more. Like it's really nice. It's really refreshing to buy a game now and turn it on and not have to worry about like detail being stripped out for clarity or shimmering induced by unstable like upscaling and stuff. And it's pretty cool. Like we're at a good point, and you know, both of them came along pretty much at the same time, because now we are at a point where I can finally look at both NVIDIA and AMD and be like, gosh damn, dude, like I have a lot more faith when I buy a game that it's going to actually look freaking incredible. Now, is it going to play incredible? Is it going to, you know what I mean? Like we're at that point now. And so we look at, you know, and that's a major thing. But then we look at like ray tracing, okay? Ray tracing is another big feature that NVIDIA started on the 20 series. And AMD, you know, really didn't have a massive answer back then. And we watched NVIDIA iterate on ray tracing. You know, it went from the 20 series, 30 series, 40 series, and now the 50 series. And I would argue that ray tracing actually started being a little bit more usable around 4070 Super power. Okay, like yeah, 4070 Super. So that was one generation that barely even worked on the 20 series, and okay, AMD didn't even need to worry about it. Just a whole bunch of resources they would have dumped in the toilet for what? For what? Honestly, for people to still say NVIDIA is better. RDNA 3 with the 30 series. Okay, there was a little bit of ray tracing performance and like, I mean, certain games with certain workloads, you know, yeah, you could use it. Was it great? Not necessarily. Was NVIDIA's was slightly better. If you had a higher end card, like 3080 or higher, you definitely were able to, you know, utilize some of that ray tracing. And I know the 3070 bros and the 3060 bros are going to be like, oh, I could ray trace. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. You could probably ray trace, but at an extreme cost. At an extreme cost. Let's just be real. Let's just be real. So with the 30 series and the 60, you know, and RDNA 2, okay. I get that, you know, definitely NVIDIA was better, and, you know, at least AMD, you know, kind of brought something to the table that was pretty much like, yeah, it works. Sometimes it doesn't work. Well, we could argue that 7000 series, RDNA 3, and the 40 series was still definitely better at it. They were doing it, you know, through hardware and everything. AMD's still doing software mostly, but had a little bit of, you know, push, probably on par with the 30 series for, you know, being able to give you some ray tracing on the 70 series. So yeah, about a generation behind on that one. And technically, you know, if you look at RDNA 4 versus Blackwell 50 series, yeah, I would say the performance is still not on par with NVIDIA in terms, but we're looking at a 9070 XT, which is essentially equivalent to, you know, 40, I would say in between 4070 Super, closer to 4070 Ti Super in terms of its ray tracing performance right now. Maybe even a little bit, maybe, yeah, about there. Like, we're just gonna leave it there. So technically still maybe a generation, but I mean, if you look at that 4070 Ti Super is close to 4080, which is, you know, close to 5070 Ti. So, I mean, it's still pretty decent. Like, it's still pretty good, but yeah, you're right. You know, definitely behind on the whole, you know, ray tracing thing, but going forward, is that still going to be the case? Like, now that ray tracing actually matters to a point where it's like, okay, you really do, if you want to play newer games and they have ray tracing, you do want to have something that's good enough. I mean, even 9060 XT does pretty decent on the ray tracing front. So when you look at that ray tracing thing, yeah, NVIDIA's ahead, but not like super far ahead anymore. They're definitely ahead, but it's still within striking distance now, and next generation GPUs from AMD are easily going to be pretty good. And NVIDIA, obviously they're going to be good too. They're going to be good too. I think next generation for ray tracing, I think we're finally going to get to a point on both manufacturers to where it's close enough to where it's like to where it doesn't even matter anymore. And I think that developers are going to find a way to start optimizing this whole ray tracing thing a lot better and work it more into, you know, their actual game engines, because I kind of think that has a lot to do with it too. I feel like a lot of ray tracing is being tacked on to older game engines, and it's just not well optimized. There's too much old stuff eating performance that it's just not able to give you higher quality ray tracing. So I still kind of think it's not just the hardware. I kind of still think it has a lot to do with optimization of actual game engines to get us to a better point where that actually matters. And so the last thing would probably be frame generation. NVIDIA now has multi-frame generation, and AMD essentially just doubles the performance. Now, you can spin this however you want to, but I've noticed that, like, in my games, if I have 60 FPS on an NVIDIA GPU and I use multi-frame generation, I usually can get like 130, 140 frames, okay? Well, with AMD, if I got 60 frames, it literally doubles that to 120. Like, MFG 4X does not quadruple your frame rate, but it does extend your frame rate pretty well. Like, it's not always like a complete quadrupling of the frame rate. And that was the same case with the regular frame generation on the 40 series. It didn't double your frame rate. It just added more frames. So it was like between every real frame, you would get a fake frame. And so it was like if you had 1, 2, 3. So it was almost like if you had 60, you'd get 90 or something. Kind of like that. Like, you'd get 90, and it still kind of works the same way. So you get 4 more frames, but it's not like a quadrupling, whereas AMD actively doubles that frame rate. So I don't necessarily think AMD's behind on that one. They're definitely, you know, they're pretty similar, but, you know, it really does kind of work out in the end to where, you know, the NVIDIA might get a little bit higher frame rate, or or the experience, you know, might feel. But when I look at the way frame generation actually works across both of these, I tend to feel less latency on the AMD side, and there is a little bit more latency on the NVIDIA side. Usually not perceivable when I'm using a controller. I usually don't perceive the latency very well on either one of those. On a controller, you can literally start frame generation from about 40 frames a second and still playable, with your screen being at least stable running forward. You know, and then maybe when you're turning the camera, it gets a little bit unstable, but still usable. That's the thing. That's the beauty about these GPUs now, is both AMD and NVIDIA are finally selling us. They're finally selling us products that will have inherent long-term sustainability kind of baked into them at a feature level. and that's kind of cool. But I mean, I guess in the long run, it's going to depend on how developers support it. So right now, we should be happy that developers are actually supporting it and working it into their games. Because if they keep doing that, then we're going to be able to benefit from that technology, and it will be better as time goes on. But if they stop doing that because everybody's complaining about it and freaking out about it, look, we're cooked if we want to go back to rasterization. Like, we're cooked. Like, there's really not that much more gain in hardware for right now. And it's crazy too. It's crazy. Like, rasterized power is pretty much tapped out. And the new way going forward, it really does matter. The AI tops matter more than anything, because we're going to need that in the future to be able to continue to sustain the gaming performance and everything that we're literally getting spoiled right now with things like frame generation. Being able to get freaking really high frame rates is just incredible. And it feels great. It looks great, and it's so enjoyable. It's so enjoyable, so much more enjoyable this generation to play games with the ability to use frame generation. It is just so much better, my friends. That wow. I enjoy it. I think it's great. And so, yeah, I don't necessarily think AMD is super far behind. I feel like with NVIDIA being the top dog, being number one, and they go through and they create these things, they create all these features, like frame generation, upscaling, all of this stuff. And they just keep moving forward. They're barreling forward. They're not really taking stock of the stuff behind them. They're just moving forward. CUDA gets supported, okay? Like, CUDA is their number one thing. That is across the board supported from their entry-level GPUs all the way up. Like, it's like CUDA is there. If you need CUDA, boom. And I respect NVIDIA for doing that. But when it comes to gaming, it feels a little haphazard sometimes. They are pretty damn good. Like, they are good. I love my NVIDIA experience. Like, don't even like think that I don't. But with AMD, I love how they take the time to support older hardware. Like, with NVIDIA, with DLSS, it stops at the 20 series. It stops. It doesn't work. With FSR2, with FSR1, with FSR 3, that supports the whole freaking stack. The whole freaking stack of AMD GPUs, man. I'm just like, gosh dang. Playing around on this 580, bro. And using like FSR3 on here, I was like, oh my gosh, that's wild. I'm going to be putting this back in this GPU or this Junior's PC, and we're going to play around with that for the rest of the weekend. But my friends, I don't think AMD's behind. See, that's the thing. It's like they're not behind. They're right on time. AMD's right on time. And you can be upset about that all you want. They're right on time. And the 9070 XT, the price for it is affordable. It's obtainable. You can essentially get that GPU if you bought a 60 series card, if you bought a 70 series card, or you can live with what you have right now and be fine. Use FSR3. Use OptiScaler. Bring in FSR4, Int 8. Use it. It's good. It's great. You have the ability, and the open source nature of AMD makes it so these things are possible. Yeah, it's a little bit more work. And eventually I'm going to start figuring it out too. But the fact of the matter remains that, like, AMD is not behind. They are. They let NVIDIA come out and do stuff, but then with AMD, at least they have a pretty decent track record of supporting their older GPUs and making that technology. I mean, think about it, man. FSR3, frame generation, on a RX 580, and being able to use those features right now in 2025 on a card that should be done, should be cooked. It should be long, like it should be e-waste at this point. It should literally be e-waste at this point, and they are still making it so their software runs on these older GPUs. And you can even use FSR3 and frame generation on your RTX 30 series that NVIDIA left behind. They left them behind. DLSS 4, that's a different story, man. That's an upscaler. It runs on there. Yeah, cool. Thankfully, they actually supported it, because we all know that they didn't have to, because nobody would have batted an eye if they didn't. They would have been mad for a little bit in the comment section. They'd be like, I can't believe NVIDIA didn't. And like, yeah, it would have went away. Water under the bridge, like it always is when it comes to NVIDIA. So look, guys, NVIDIA's worth buying on a whole nother level than AMD, just because of the CUDA support. But when it comes to gaming, AMD has your back, man. And that's why I make content for them. That's why I continue to spread the word about AMD, because it's really not as bad as people try to make it sound, and they're really not as far behind as people would like you to believe. It's just not there. Trust me, I've been playing games for over 40 years now, and AMD's hit the spot for me like all the time. Like I don't ever find myself gaming on AMD and thinking, oh man, I wish I had an NVIDIA. Like I don't ever feel like, well, I do have an NVIDIA, but when I was not having it, like there was no way that I was going without an AMD GPU and just having access to NVIDIA. There was no way. So that's all I got to say on this one. If you like this content, do not forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.